why the US stock market keeps on rising. I'm going to explain my experience trying to figure out why this happens and what about America that has led to the success that it has seen. In other words, American exceptionalism. When I first started learning about finance, I learned that the stock market has gone up an average of 7% a year and it goes through busts, but the trends always upwards over the long term. It has been for over a century since the record of data has been readily available and collected. However, when I started working as a trader in Hong Kong and analyzing returns of various subclasses of equities in college as well, I realized that this is only true in America in the 20th and 21st century, but it's not true before that time and almost never true in other countries. So it took me a while to find this data and to look into other countries, but most countries are relatively flat, like Korea, Hong Kong, China, European indices, etc. Even though these are supposed to be very developed places that are using a lot of technology, have low corruption, etc. I mean, I don't know about China for corruption, but either way, they've huge growth. So China was actually baffled at because it's seen so much growth more than any other country, especially of that size, but they have such a lackluster stock performance. So I thought about how does that mathematically even make sense? So I thought that the stock market must equal economic growth or GDP times the profitability of public companies only. Now, the GDP growth, that factor was so high. So I said, okay, so it must either be that the growth was only in private companies, right? Like the public companies didn't experience that, and or that maybe the profitability was only in private companies. But it just seems a little unlikely. I later learned actually that many people in China see the stock market as the goal, not as a means to achieve growth. So they work hard, go public, cash out, and see, hey, we achieved our goal. We went public. And now we can retire and relax, even though they're still management of the company, right? Like they didn't retire, but they think that they can't. So compared to theory, it's supposed to be a tool to provide capital for that business to grow when they need money to grow. Alternatively, my coworkers in Hong Kong, on the other side, they would act baffled when the stock market in the US would just keep rising. They would say, oh, Americans just keep buying and it just seems to keep going up. It's like it never goes down to their surprise. And this got me thinking, okay, so it's just America. So there's this sense of American exceptionalism, which is the idea about America having traits that make them better than other countries, what has led to their growth and position as a superpower. Now, this obviously sounds braggadocious and receives criticism, but it also receives attention because America is the superpower. So people are simply trying to ascribe reasons as to why that is. They're trying to understand what has caused this. So I've pondered this myself, and the stock market continually rises while economic growth is low, right? Economic growth of, say, 1, 2, 3%. It tells me that the country's productivity must continually be improving, and therefore so is the profitability. And the percent of large companies that are remaining private has been growing. So it's not just that the economic juggernauts are taking most of the market share that happen to be public as well. I mean, you could make an argument for that in the sense that the largest companies like Microsoft and these FANG companies, as the financial people call it, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Netflix shouldn't really be in there, but those stocks alone are bigger than the stock markets of many other countries, like the entire stock market of other countries. So there is an argument for that. But on the other side, the amount of companies that are remaining private at later stages is also growing in the US. So there's that other side of it. Now, in the book Lords of Finance that I mentioned I'm reading, they mention how Americans back in, say, the early 1900s, they treated the stock market like gambling and they wouldn't mind betting everything and failing as they could just try again in the future. And this actually reminded me of Michael Milken, which is, if you don't know, he's one of finance's largest titans ever. And he's consistently spoken about America's ability to let people fail. And he thinks that this is one of the defining factors of the culture that leads to success. Because many entrepreneurs say, hey, you fail 1,000 times before you succeed. And he also mentions how he met Russians who wanted to invest in some venture capital opportunities. And he asked them, how would you react if these companies would fail? And the Russians responded as if it was obvious, like, oh, then we'll kill them, demand money from their families, etc. Like we have things that we can do. So Milken, of course, was like, no, 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 don't do that. And he attributes American exceptionalism in a way. I'm not sure if he referenced that vernacular specifically, but he attributes it to the ability to fail in America, which so many entrepreneurs say how they learned and were eventually able to build efficient, successful businesses. And I think this has led to constant rises in productivity, which has helped the stock market. Perhaps investor sentiment has also helped as well as these titans. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the math behind the stock market performance compared to the economic performance of a country. Let me know if there's any economists out there that are well educated, or even if you can just use your brain and logic that think that my formula is wrong, or that you can make a better one or explain the disparity in the performances. But that's my thoughts about it. It started with thinking, okay, well, there's few giants that are taking a lot of share, but then there's also more private companies that are large that are staying private. So it kind of balances out. So if the GDP is low in America, the growth, I should say, then it must be the profitability of public companies. We already discussed the public part. So maybe the productivity or profitability is improving. Why is that? Well, human nature constantly builds off the innovations of others. And America, you can try and fail. There's a culture of ambition, right? So these are all things that contribute. And for example, when I was in the Philippines, this might sound harsh. I love that country, but it feels like genuinely like it's a third world country, but there's remnants of colonialism where countries like America came in and brought sort of new ways of doing things like food, technology, and then Philippines is essentially just riding off that and has not improved from like the 50s. It feels like going back into the 50s of America, something like this, right? Like these diners, and they're still using the US military trucks for public buses now, right? And it's almost like, oh, this other country came in and brought all these things, and now we're all still using them to this day. Well, as America's moved way past that, America's developed, advanced, and it feels like the Philippines was at this low level, never progressing. America colonialism comes in and brings it up to a new level and brings all these new things and innovation that they didn't have. And then they just stayed there again. So that's my honest opinion. You can disagree if you want, but that's what I think. And it's been my observations. And I'm trying to think there must be a reason for this. And it's probably the culture. It seems like American culture, there's less corruption, there's more ambition, and you have the ability to fail and therefore innovate, build off each other. It's just a very good business environment in general. And this is not really related, but just to show you that the cultural differences do exist. Some are better than others in certain areas, like in business. And for example, when I would throw things out in the Philippines, my girl said, oh, those people said, hey, maybe Americans are better than Pinoy. Pinoy is Filipinos. And she's like, oh, the person running that food stand said that because you throw things out, whereas Filipinos will just litter. And people litter in America too, but it's less common, especially among the demographics that founded America. That sort of culture, there's less littering. It's more of a high trust society. But then you throw in a bunch of diversity, and there's people from other backgrounds and other cultures that sort of break that down and will make cities like New York very dirty. But that's another topic, so I'm not going to get much into that now. But those are my thoughts on American exceptionalism and the disparity between stock market performance and GDP performance, and why US markets continually rise, while in other countries that have experienced huge growth haven't necessarily seen that. And it seems like most of it's due to cultural, as well as potentially the FANGs just consuming so much market share globally. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe, comment if you think I'm stupid or crazy or insensitive to other cultures or judgmental, etc. You know, at the end of the day, what I'm doing is critique, and I am judging and giving my honest conclusion of what I think is, you know, the reality of the world.